afternoon. Thanks for agreeing to be interviewed for the Animas blog.
Good afternoon to you, and thanks a lot for the opportunity. I really enjoyed the Anima space and the Animas people overall, so it's always a pleasure.
Well, it's great to have you here, and I'll pass on that feedback to the team. So, with no further ado, you're a transformative coach. Can you tell me about your coaching?
Well, where do I start? Well, let's start from what I do, shall we? What I do, I coach professionals mainly. I'm a professional myself. I work as an engineer in building services for quite a long time, and I came across many different people, clients, other professionals. And now as a coach, I coach professionals who wants to snap out of what I call the rat race, what everyone calls the rat race, really. And it's more when people start to get sick of chasing things, chasing what we're supposed to chase, in contrast with the constant insecurity that comes in the modern days. Especially if we start to think about it from the pandemic onwards, with the crisis, economical crisis, political crisis, even wars, we all get this sense of insecurity, but we all get embedded in our brain this internalized sense for safety anyway, and stability. So we all try to chase these sort of things. And as I see in professionals, I see this very common, like starting with myself, really. That's one of the reasons why I got into this. And in my generation, I should say, especially because every generations have different challenges. But growing up, we've been taught what we should do, what we should study, how to approach the job environment and work, how to build a career, what we should aim to. Basic things like from buying a house, having kids, building a family, getting this stability. And I realized that at some point things get in contrast. At least it went in contrast with myself. And yeah, like you keep chasing these things which you will never be able to get, because this target line, this finish line, it keeps going further and further. So the more you run, it always feels like you're never running fast enough. And this finish line is always going further and further. And at some point I realized that myself, but all human beings probably, we are not really trying to be happy, or at least not as the top priority. As a top priority, we have feeling safe. So we most likely want to feel safe rather than happy if we have to choice. So what do we do here? That's where this sort of dichotomy comes in. So do I keep chasing these target which keeps going further and further, or do I pause and actually ask myself what I want to do and try to reframe the status quo of things, making sure, does this still align with who I am? Is this what I actually want to do? Is this what I actually want to pursue? It might be. I'm not suggesting it should not be, but we need to consciously make this decision. That's where it comes from. And I'll tell you later a little bit of my story if you want, on how that developed in my mind. So that's what I do essentially with professionals, is inviting them to pause and reflect on what they actually want, whether that's realistic or not realistic, whether what they are doing is realistic or not realistic. Because of course, all these chasing comes with a lot of anxiety as well, many times. So just pausing for a minute can help, I find. And in my experience, I see many professionals that come with very pragmatic topics and challenges they want to achieve. A lot of the time they are focused on, again, financial achievements or career achievements and these sort of things. And after a few coaching sessions, we find out it's not really the goal that they wanted in the first place. And so we start to reframe things in a more deeper sense. Not that you forget career altogether. Career is always important for a professional, but you may want to reframe how to approach it. And chasing the shiniest role or the biggest salary is not a target. It's a means to an end. It's a mean to an end, which are two different things. And so we started this sort of exploration, which is always very insightful, and everyone has different insights. And that's how I'm progressing with that. So that's what I do as a coach, I would say. Is not really in a nutshell, because I already spent quite a bit of time explaining it.
My understanding, you're working with professionals who are sort of chasing or reaching higher and higher for this bar. And the higher they get, the higher the bar gets.
Yeah.
It's like they're chasing their tail, and maybe, their goals aren't necessarily their own goals.
Well, it feels like they are their own goals, but sometimes they genuinely are. Most of the times they are internalized for education, society, expectation that they have of themselves, because of course the way they've been brought up, the way we've been brought up, we internalized our education and our, whether it's come from our parents, our schools, university, or anything else. And so at that point, we do believe everything. It's a genuine belief that we have of ourselves, the genuine expectations that we have of ourselves. But if we allow ourselves to be kinder with ourselves, to be more kind, we might discover that there's actually something more.
Mm. So it's the delving a little bit deeper below the surface to find what it really is, like the under, we call it the symptoms versus the root cause.
Exactly. And especially when you get into career coaching and in corporate coaching, everything is very often based on performance. So we, as professionals, we need to perform well in order to be good professionals. But is that really the goal? That's the sort of thing that I question. So do we live better when we perform better, or do we perform better when we live better? So, and that's where I get into this concept of working and coaching for purpose and balance, which purpose and balance is a different things for anyone. And once you find your own balance, your genuine balance, you can explore your own purpose. You can face uncertainty with more light heart. And at that point, you can perform more creatively. You can allow yourself to do more things that might scare you at the beginning. You feel less an imposter. Imposter syndrome even is something that we all suffer at some point in our lives. And again, questioning why we're doing things. And even as a coach, I started as a coach, and of course, you face imposter syndrome. I got a lot of my colleagues, even while I was training with animals, all the people in my cohort, we were all sharing this experience. Am I good enough? And then you ask yourself, but why am I actually doing this? Am I doing this for myself or for supporting people? Well, actually, I'm doing this for supporting people. So who cares how I feel? If I have something to offer, yes, some people will resonate with it and some people will not. As long as I can reach a single person, I've done my part. That's it. All of a sudden, the imposter syndrome vanished. But until you actually pause and ask these questions to yourself, that's never going to happen. And that's where, again, in this case, my performance as a coach skyrocketed, in the sense that I started to get a lot of feedbacks from my clients. Everything became more interesting. I could allow myself to find my own voice as a coach as well, because of course we all learn particular frameworks and models and everything. And then when we start to internalize them, we can become more creative and find different ways of doing things. And that's when I started to explore playfulness into the coaching session, where people may come with very serious topics, and until you don't allow them to actually break out from this seriousness and this anxiety, they can't get anywhere. And then you say, okay, you try to play a game in a way. There are many different ways to do this. All of a sudden, they come up with these beautiful insights, because, of course, they are just playing, right? So it's just a game. There's no commitment to it. But without the commitment, you actually come up with some insights that they say, oh, actually, that makes sense in my real life. And so, and it's very powerful in the end. But of course, it comes with a lot of even personal work as well, which is never-ending personal work and exploration. And again, it all starts with exploring our own balance, our sense of purpose, our own way of dealing with uncertainty from the external world and from our internal world as well, and learn how to be more kind to ourselves.
I love what you said about how, if we can reach one person with the work that we're doing, it's worth it. I also share that belief. I resonate with that. I wondered if you could just touch on or dive a little bit into how you found your voice as a coach, and also how using playfulness as well in the sessions.
Absolutely. So how you find your voice? That's an extremely good question. And I want to start by saying that's probably a personal way of doing it, which is not just about coaching, it's about anything else really. Because as I said, I am an engineer. And before getting into coaching growing up, I am a musician and a music producer in my own time, like nothing too serious. But I always liked this dichotomy of being an engineer and a musician, in the sense that was creating a very good balance between my right hemisphere, my left hemisphere, of my brain, right? So the analytical and the creative brain. And after some time, I realized I was approaching engineering very creatively, and I was approaching music very analytically. So it's this sort of mix and match of things, right? And I realized that, especially in my work as an engineer, when everyone says you need to think out of the box, I don't believe in thinking out of the box. I only believe that people has larger or smaller boxes. And if your box is the largest in the room that contains all the smaller boxes, everyone thinks that you are thinking out of the box, but you're just thinking within your box because you worked based on your personality, your values, and everything, to make the box the right fit for you. And that's what happens in coaching as well. I say, okay, well, if this works in something very serious as engineering, where you can come up with these creative solutions that people say, okay, how did you even think about it? Then why shouldn't it work with coaching? And then I said, okay, I'm going to allow myself to try things. And again, this comes, of course, with a lot of contracting with clients, because of course, clients need to know what they're getting into. And I'm very blunt with this. So when we start our session, this is how I work. I might ask questions which might seem like they don't make any sense. And I'm one of those coaches where I really trust the process. And there are many coaching sessions where I have no clue what's happening within the client's mind. And then we end up in a question. I generally go throughout the entire session like we are not getting anywhere. I check in every now and again and say, oh my God, it's been really useful. And then they are the best coaching sessions of their lives. Whereas there are some other coaching session where I try to control them in a way a bit more, try to be a bit more serious. And I think we're having the best session ever, and they don't get any insight in the end. So, and that makes me think, because at the end of the day, we as coaches, we are also people. We might turn up, we may have good days, we may have bad days. And funnily enough, some clients might resonate even with our bad days. So there are so many factors, there's this multitude of parameters that come into play that if you are honest with yourself, we cannot control anything. So one of the principles of coaching is we don't want to lead the coaching session. We don't want to have leading questions. It's embedded again in our brains that in a way we want to control things, want to feel like we are in control. But sometimes we need to let that go. And once we let that go, and then where all the playfulness comes in. So, but sometimes I have these coaching sessions and I'm like, I have no idea why this question is coming up, but I'm just going to throw it there, see what comes up for you. And sometimes they say, oh, well, it doesn't really tell me anything. Let's crack on with something else. And sometimes they're like, oh, I never thought about that. And sometimes it's like an image or literally a film that I'm running in my mind. I'm going to be like, I want to offer you this thought, this film that I'm running in my mind while you're speaking, and something good can come up. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. You just go down the more traditional path of asking question or reflecting back and so on. But what we get into the comes up by, again, we spend a lot of silences in coaching sessions. You stay quiet, you just let your client do their thinking. And in the meantime, I'm a very visual person. So I start to create images and films literally in my mind. And I use that as an inspiration for me to start sort of game of some sort. I don't know, with a client some time ago, what came up is it was a first session we were having. These were like myself, they were professional and musicians. So I was like, okay, if your life was a chord, what chord would it be? Is it a major or a minor chord? What notes are made of this chord? And if it was a melody, how would this melody go? It doesn't have anything to do with their actual issue, but the distraction actually works out for some reason. And I found these really, 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 really inspiring and fun as well. I mean, the coaching session doesn't have to be serious and absolutely we need to go deep and find out all the reasons why I think this is happening and then work out your triggers and everything else. Sometimes just taking it with a light heart and have some fun, it's extremely helpful.
Wow, as a musician, your major minor chord question really struck a chord with me. You have to pardon the pun there. As someone who you spoke earlier about questions in coaching conversation, as someone early in my coaching journey, I struggled with a lot of self-doubt and over-evaluation of myself. And I'm wondering if you could speak to the question, is there such a thing as a bad question in coaching?
A bad question in coaching. I wouldn't say a bad question. I don't think there is a bad question. Well, a question that might be offensive to the client, perhaps. Apart from that, I want to say a question that, and I'm already giving a bad answer in this because I'm already thinking a lot too much, is a question that we think about too much. Because when we start to think about a question too much, it means we're not in the present moment anymore. At least that's how I say we're starting to get into, okay, I want to I need to think about this. Yes, sometimes you might have a blank, that's fine. And that's where your kindness to yourself comes in. Say, okay, just take your time. If you have a blank, you have a blank. Or perhaps you want to leave your client go on with their thoughts. You thought about a question, you don't want to interrupt them. They keep going, and then you lose it. If you keep thinking about that question, perhaps there's room for an interruption, for an appropriate interruption, if you feel like it is the right moment to do so. But if you let it go, you keep thinking about that question, you are missing all the other things that your client is saying. And that's why if you keep thinking too much about a particular question, again, I wouldn't say it's bad. Sometimes it might work, absolutely. There's no right or wrong. But that's probably what I would say in my own experience. When I get hung up too much on the questions that I want to ask, that's where I miss a lot.
Is overthinking the enemy of good coaching then? Is that what we're saying?
Well, overthinking, perfectionism, perfect is the enemy of good, generally speaking. So trying to work too hard, I would say, trying to work too hard and try to show that we are good coaches. And I do that a lot. Again, as I said, we have good and bad days. In a bad day, you want to show yourself as a good coach. Absolutely. That's going to happen throughout your career, probably. And that's fine. But again, the point is not about you showing yourself as a good coach. The point is supporting your clients. And if we keep the focus on the clients, at the end of the day, everything vanishes because you are there for them. And sometimes it's a conscious reminder that I have to do to myself, because it's, of course, we are humans and we all have our issues, our problems, our challenges, and our insecurities, and they always get in the way. They always will. It's fine, as long as we acknowledge them, and during our reflective practice, we think about it. Okay, what happened in there? Okay, that's fine. You don't need to allow them to hunt you down, but just acknowledge them. Okay, that happened. That's fine. And move forward and try to learn from it.
In my experience of being a coach and a client, if there is a question that's asked that doesn't land very well, typically the client will say, well, give you a funny look, and then say, maybe this would be a better question instead.
Absolutely.
Or you perhaps just have a laugh and, or take a pause and say, oh, hang on, that was a crap question. Let me rephrase it. Because we're all human and we're going to and ah. It's natural to make those mistakes. You mentioned earlier about, your client snapping out of the rat race.
Mm-hmm.
You also mentioned your journey in engineering. I'm curious just to delve into a little bit more how you snapped out of the rat race to coaching.
Yeah, I've got a professional and a personal answer to this. So the professional one is that I joined the organization that I still work for about 10 years ago. I joined as a graduate. I moved up the organization hierarchy in a way. And I live in London. I'm a professional. So you might imagine the peer pressure that you get from all fronts. Like you need to change job every few years because you need to jump role and get a better salary. And you do this 2 or 3 times. So you end up at my age at 40s when you have a great salary. And I've never been so much attached to money per se. I'm lucky enough to have a relatively good family, so that I didn't have to actually worry about money too much. So that surely plays a role in terms of my privilege. But I was like, well, my priority, the things that are important to me, is a good work environment, having nice projects that keep me inspired, having nice colleagues, having nice collaborative environment. And funnily enough, the organization I work for, they are very keen into supporting their staff in developing not only from the technical perspective, but from the human perspective in terms of genuine leadership, adaptive leadership in a way, which is very collaborative. And I started to mentor people as well. So first of all, I had to fight with all the peer pressure, and say to myself, well, I'm actually happy where I am. And even that quite double question it in the sense, am I saying this only because I want to be safe or because I'm actually happy about this? So you started to have a few interviews around job interviews just to explore things. And I talked to other people in the similar organizations. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want their life. And that's really not what I want. So I stayed. I held on my choice, and I stayed there. And then I started to mentor junior engineers, and I realized how their challenges are, again, not have much to do with the technical challenges, but more about how they perceive themselves and how they perceive the world around them. As we said before, procrastination, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, all these sort of things which are common to all of us within some extent. And that got me curious and say, okay, it's not just that I want to learn something more. And then I want to learn something more beyond mentoring. And I started to explore coaching. And then I pause that there for that perhaps gets into my personal reason, because let's pause that there for a minute, because my personal reason ties at that point into this question of what happens beyond mentoring. Because even the thing that made me snap all together is where I was organizing my wedding. And when I was organizing my wedding, I was with my wife. We'd never been big party people. We are fairly reserved, but wanted you to have the proper wedding, right? The proper wedding as it's supposed to be, right? So a lot of money going into it, plan it, organize, half of the family from the north, half from the family from the south of Italy. We were living in London. So lots of challenging there, comes with a lot of anxiety. And then COVID hit. So everything went out of the window, the planning went out of the window. And we're planning it like to the very detailed, because we weren't sure in the sense, when I say to the detail, actually checking whether that's what we wanted to do. I mean, I even built a spreadsheet that would calculate whether or not we were happy with the wedding rather than something else. So it was a crazy level of thoughts. Then COVID hit, and we ended up having a very small reception at a register office here in Walthamstow with just the witnesses. And it was the best day of our lives. So we had the time to spend for ourselves. And that's when I said, oh, that's probably not what I want, that big wedding. So that's probably something that I need to think about in other areas of my life. And then that's where I confirmed my own narrative of I want to stick with this organization because that's what I like. And so I started to do a bit more exploration about myself, because the first thing that came up at that point, am I right or am I wrong in thinking that? There's also the self-doubt if everyone wants to do these sort of things and I don't want, there must be something wrong with me. And that's when I started to explore a bit more things like personality tests. There are many different models for personality tests, Enneagrams, the big fives. And so I did all of these, and I went to do the MBTI test, or 16 personalities test. I did all these tests, and funnily enough, some tests also gives you the professions that would be very suitable for your personality. And the first profession that was highlighted in this test was coaching. I was like, okay, that's a sign. I need to do it. So and that's the moment where I snapped out of this. So the combination of these, I would like to explore more what's beyond mentoring and this thing that happened, which is, again, it's not a serious thing. It's just a test, right? But it sort of made a click in my mind. At that point, I was going through all the load of anxiety of, I need to invest money, I need to learn how to adult properly, right? So leave music out, learn how to invest, make the best out of your money, set a deposit aside for buying a house and all these sort of things. And when this click happened in my mind, all of a sudden, I had a whole lot of disposable income that I could invest on myself and something that would resonate more with me rather than trying the stock market or the cryptocurrencies or, again, the deposit for the house or everything. And so if I think about this more realistically in the modern world is moving somewhere different compared to what I think it was going. So, okay, what do I do with this? I don't want to spend money just for the sake of it. I want to invest in something, which is myself in this case. That resonates a lot more with me. Coaching sounds like something interesting that resonates. It allows me to support people beyond mentoring engineers. And so I'd say, okay, I'm going to go with, I did some research. I went into Animas. I came across Animas. Okay, you know what? Yes, it is a bit of money that I need to invest, but something good can come out of it. So I'm just going to go with it. And again, that again was probably one of the best choices in my life. Because yes, now I'm setting up a practice on the side. I'm still working engineering because I love it. And I'm sitting a coaching practice on the side. And who knows what it's going to take me. Perhaps it's going to take off in a few years. I might do that full time, move abroad, do a digital nomad, do this remotely with people in London all around the world. Or I'm going to be happy to keep it as it is and keep the two roles. So snapping out of that gave me this sort of flexibility in a way, because I used to be very rigid on what I wanted to do. Again, try to follow this predetermined life path in a way. Whereas snapping out of it, again, all these little pieces of the puzzles that came together. And I said, okay, I have this, I have this, I have that. And then this stupid thing happened. Okay, this is the cherry on top of the cake. That means I need to do something with this. And that gave me the courage in a way to say, okay, I'm going to try and live more in the present and try not to worry too much about the future, because we don't know what the future is going to hold for us. Of course, I still worry about the future, but still I say, okay, this is not like, I don't feel like this is a stupid choice. I'm making a choice which is mindful. It probably doesn't align with what everyone is doing, but it's mine, and we'll see where this is going to take me.
Yeah, I think there's so much that people will be able to relate to in your story. I know I certainly can, Stefano. Um, I wonder if I could take you back to that moment you mentioned when your interest in mentoring combined with when you took the I think it's the Myers-Briggs 16 personalities test that said, coaching is
Yeah.
for me. In that moment, you mentioned some of the anxiety. What doubts did you have?
What doubts in what sense?
in in terms of wow, I'm going to train to be a coach. What sort of thoughts and feelings, maybe doubts came, or perhaps no doubts came up for you, just in terms of that making that decision of this is real and I'm going to do this now?
I'll tell you what, my main doubt was whether I would be able to stick to my choice and still take it with a light heart across along the journey. And I'm saying this because, as I said, anxiety is not going to go away. I still need to live with it when you are not earning as much as your peers, because that's a practical thing. We need to deal with that, right? And it's a give and take. So what I do, I try to feed this narrative of mine, because bear in mind, it's still a narrative. I've just changed the narrative, but it's still a narrative that I want to pursue. I try to proceed more mindfully. And again, we all compare ourselves to others, whether we like it or not. As much as we coaches like to say you shouldn't compare yourself to others, but we still do it. So I try to compare myself to others and in a more comprehensive way, and not try just to see what they have that I don't, but also to see what I have that they don't, and put that on the scale and see where this scale goes. Because yes, they earn more than me, but perhaps they have a very bad work environment. Perhaps they do a lot of extra hours that are unpaid. So when we break this down to the hourly rate, they actually take as much as me, because I don't do much overtime. And I have more, I want to say it's probably a strong word, but that's the word that I keep using. It's more purposeful life, in the sense that I'm doing something that truly resonates with me. Not saying that my peers don't resonate with what they do, but you can tell when someone follows what we're calling the predetermined life path genuinely, because that's actually what they want to do, from someone who's just abiding to an internalized rule. It's a very different conversations that you're going to be having, because so when you have someone who truly resonates with what they're doing, they tell you a story that might be challenging, but they tell you a story passionately with excitement anyway. There is a bit of anxiety, but it's a positive anxiety in a way. It's something to look forward to anyway. People who don't really resonate with what they're doing, that's just the anxiety, they're just the challenges, they're just the trouble, that they don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what I used to do. I still do sometimes, but again, this is not something it's not a one day kind of task and then you forget about it. It's a day-to-day job that you need to do with yourself. And yeah, I feel like I've been digressing a bit. I'm not sure that I'm still get hitting the point of your question.
Well, I can tell that resonate with what you're doing as you speak with a great deal of passion and excitement about your cause. Just one question that was on my mind is about transferable skills. So my journey, I went from civil engineering to then IT and now to coaching. And I found there was a great deal of transferable skills and, fell into that trap of thinking, oh, am I walking away here? Am I throwing it all away? And in reality, it wasn't like that for me. I'm wondering if you had a similar experience to that.
Transferable skills. I suppose you mean like multidisciplinary skills in a way, right? Like you're doing
Yeah.
multiple things. It's definitely transferable in the sense that when we start to grow in our career, at some point, we start to deal with concepts of leadership and managing tasks, people, and everything. Not everyone wants to become a leader, and that's where perhaps your journey stays with your profession, and that's totally fine, of course. That's what you like, that's what you want to do, and you keep going that way. When you start adding other elements, and that's what we say in our organization, is that a good engineer and a good leader is not someone who only knows technical skills or only knows commercial skills or only has human skills. He's someone who can develop skills into multiple aspects. Then, of course, we all have our own inclination. There are leaders who are more technically oriented, people who are more people oriented, people are more commercial oriented, and so on. Nonetheless, you need to have an overall understanding on everything. So, and at some point when you start to cultivate all these different skills, everything becomes transferable in a way. So it doesn't mean that you are leaving behind anything, you're just adding things. And it's not just adding in terms of compartmentalizing things, because everything sort of ties together at some point. Because again, I can tell you my experience as an engineer, for instance, you can be the best engineer in the world, you can do the best project in the world, but if you cannot connect to your client, if you cannot tell a story properly, your message is not going to get across. You are only as good as you can communicate, right? And I can see many people, many young engineers that I mentor, they go to the client presenting this huge list of tables and numbers and calculations and things, and the client just gets bored. And then all they're going to do is just pick up on that number that doesn't tie up with the rest. Whereas if you present the information in a way that it's meaningful for your audience, then you can connect. And that's, to answer your question, transferable skills, that's what it means. It's not just a compartmentalized set of skills, it's an entwining set of skills that you can transfer anywhere you want. And again, one thing that I love, especially about the UK, for instance, this mentality that you can reinvent yourself at any point. Because I come from Italy, which is a very more strict culture where you start a job when you're 20 and that's the job that you're going to do for the rest of your life. But it's probably still with the same organization anyway. Whereas in the UK, everything is much more fluid. You can discover yourself any point of your life. I started this coaching journey when I was in my late 30s, but even if you want to do that in your 50s, in your 60s, that you can absolutely do that. You can do things more mindfully as well, because of course, all these set of transferable skills that you build in time, you are more conscious of them and you can do something meaningful with them. But of course, again, you need time to build these transferable skills. And yeah, so the time that you put in to build the transferable skill, the maturity that you develop over time, the awareness that you develop over time, that when you put everything together allows you to explore a bit more, I would say. Yes. Still with all the level of insecurity that we're still saying all the way through, of course.
Is there anything you'd say, Stefano, to someone who perhaps, is experiencing some of the challenges you've experienced, resonating with what you're saying, perhaps considering training as a coach, thinking of having a career change as well, maybe from engineering into coaching, and it's just concerned about, the investment in money, time, and then the risk that they might be losing or leaving something behind by retraining and by changing sector. Is there anything you'd say to them?
I'm not going to make any suggestion in terms of finance because I leave that part out. I'm not a financial advisor and everyone has different financial situations, of course. What I can say is that it's worth exploring if it's something that you feel it's right for you, or if you're not sure if it's right for you, but you want to give it a go. You don't necessarily need to start with investing 20 grand in 3 different courses and everything. You can start bit, but there are so many resources around. You can buy a course for 4 quid in many online platforms just to see what it is and actually explore a bit more. There are many free resources that you can explore. You can have free discovery calls with different coaches and see what they tell you, see what it feels like. There are many different things which are pretty much free that allow you to explore whether that's actually something you want to do or not. In terms of you're already doing another profession, and what do you do? What's all the fear that comes with doing something new and different? Again, everyone is different. I personally decided to go with, I'll keep this as a side hustle. It takes a bit more of effort on me because of course now I have 2 jobs, but this allows me to have a job that I still like and it pays the bills, and I can focus on something else that I'm resonating a lot with in the past few years, that allows me to build a practice without worrying too much about the financial aspects and build it slow and steady, because that's how I like to go. I like to go slow and steady. Some other people are like, if I don't quit and start something new, I'm never going to do it. That's perfectly fine. If you realistically can plan for it, there's nothing wrong with it. Everyone is different, as long as we make sure that we pause, as we said before. reflect, and realign with who we are, there's no right or wrong answer. We just need to, everything starts with taking the time for ourselves and actually understand what's the right way for us and not for the rest of society.
Mhm.
As awkward and odd it might come out, but if it does resonate, it resonates, and so you just need to follow it. That's what I think.
I loved what you said about just trying it on for size. And I thought it's a bit like buying a new pair of jeans, a new brand from a new shop. Go try them on, speak to people who wear them. You don't need to make that decision and jump in before, collecting the information. I resonate with that approach. Perhaps it's coming from an engineering and an IT background, doing that due diligence, that research. Very briefly, if we could just touch on, how you came to decide to train with animals, what your experience was, the course.
Absolutely. As I said, I did a few research when I decided that I wanted to explore this coaching experience. I did a few free courses, few very low investment courses, and then I said, okay, that's something I want to take the step further. So you start to look for proper courses, started to understand the ICF accreditation schemes, different levels of accreditation, what you need to get out of it. I came across different courses, and the thing that made me resonate with Animas, which was a bit more comprehensive and holistic in a way. I came across lots of courses which were offering just the grow model, for instance, very tailored to a specific model. And that didn't quite resonate with me because I am a big picture kind of guy. So I need to sort of see what happens. And as I said, I try to have a combination of analytical and creative tools within myself, right? So I like structure, but not too much. So I like to understand the structure, understand the models, but then I like to mix things up. And if I only know one thing, what are you going to mix that thing with? Right? So, and that's what I found in Animas. It was a good combination of things, different models, different approaches, a good platform, a good community that I could interface with. So I said, okay, that feels comprehensive enough for me to give me broad understanding of things. It gives good accreditation for the ICF, and feels like it's something that I could use in the real life. Again, as I said before, there's not right or wrong, because some people might be like, I need to do things one at a time. I wanna nail the grow model, and that's what I'm gonna do. And I don't want to know anything else, because otherwise it becomes too much for me. That's fine. Some more detailed oriented kind of person might do something like that, right? I want to really to understand the nitty-gritty of the grow model. So again, there's no right or wrong. What resonated with me in Animas was this holistic sort of umbrella that covers many different aspects of coaching, and at least gives you the inspiration and the motivation to go and explore the things that resonate more with you.
And since graduating, you've delivered a CPD lecture, one of our monthly series on Connect, Realign, coaching professionals for purpose and balance.
Yes, that's what I keep saying in this call as well. Pause, reflect, and realign. That's the starting point for everything. And that's I suppose that's my suggestion or invitation to professionals, which are always rushing into their professional lives, which anyway takes a good third of our lives anyway, which you need to pay attention to. Another third is your actual life, your personal life. Another third, if you're lucky enough, is sleeping properly. And the something that blends these balance together is something that allow you to realign and orient to where you want to go. So yeah, that is my invitation really, and the same thing that I shared in the CPD that we did some time ago. And yeah, so now while I speak, I'm just creating my own stream of things, like professionals wants to seek more balance and purpose and well-being, to learn how to live with uncertainty and approach it in a more personal way. And the encouragement comes from pausing, reflecting, and realigning. And that's how we try to achieve that in my coaching sessions. And how do we do that is would be the playtime, really. It's a bit more a light-hearted way of doing it and try to bring everything together.
It's been a pleasure to have you on the series Journeys in Coaching, Stefano. Where can we find you, and how can we contact you?
Thanks you for having me, first of all. And where you can find me, well, I am on, you can find me on Google as a Stefano Centineo Transformative Coach. I got my website, stefanocentineo.com. I've got my social media, which I'm trying to get in. You can find me on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram. I'm still learning on how to use social media properly because that's not proper my cup of tea. But again, I like to learn different languages, so I'm learning how to use social media a bit more. On my website, there's a contact form, or you can book a free discovery call of 30 minutes where I like to dive into things that perhaps allow for a mini coaching session for free. And I keep coming up with different ideas for workshops. I'm trying to create some new workshops, both live and online, to mix things up a bit, create some partnerships to, again, bring some playfulness in coaching a bit more. So yeah, stay in touch in that sense. Feel free to follow me on my social media or get in touch directly with me. Feel free to book a discovery call. And for anything else, if you just want to collaborate, feel free to use my contact form on my website.
Well, thank you, Stefano. I would fully encourage everyone to reach out and have a discovery call with you. You're fantastic to speak to and fascinating. And I lost my train of thought there.
That's fine. It's part of the experience, isn't it?
Yes, it's been pause, reflect, realign.
Yes.
Exactly what I need to do. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Stefano. And I'm hoping to see
Thanks.
you again on the Coaches Uncaged for an additional lecture, maybe part of our monthly CPD series.
Absolutely. It would be my pleasure.